is chairman of City Trust, and that's Money Talk for today, closing it for today. And just the weather, it's mainly fine, but it'll be apart from some haze, so it'll be okay for walking. Be cool in the morning, dry during the day with a maximum temperature of around 20 degrees. Be moderate easterly winds and fresh at times at first. Temperature currently 15 degrees, relative humidity is 78%. Back chat next, but first the news by Samantha Butler.
Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton have scored early primary wins in Georgia, according to CNN projections, as the two presidential frontrunners look to take command of their party nominating battles in the 2016 campaign's biggest night of voting, Super Tuesday. Georgia was one of 12 states voting. Opinion polls showed Trump leading in nearly all of them, on the way to a possible big night that would intensify worries among Republican leaders who fear the billionaire could inflict long-term damage on the party. The head of the FBI, James Comey, says Apple's iPhone encryption is like a vicious guard dog that stops law enforcement agencies from gathering evidence. Speaking before a Congress committee in Washington, Mr. Comey acknowledged if the FBI succeeded in getting Apple to unlock the phone, it could then set a precedent for other cases.
Any decision of a court about a matter is potentially useful to other courts, which is what a precedent is. I happen to think, having talked to experts, there are technical limitations to how useful this particular San Bernardino technique will be, given how the phones have changed. But sure, other courts, other prosecutors, other lawyers for companies will look to that for guidance or to try and distinguish it.
Apple says creating a tool to unlock the phones would weaken the security of hundreds of millions of devices. NATO's most senior commander in Europe has accused Russia of helping the Syrian government to deliberately create a refugee crisis as a weapon of war. General Philip Breedlove told a Senate committee in Washington that he could see no reason for Moscow and Damascus to use indiscriminate weapons against civilians in Syria other than to displace people. He made the point again at a briefing for journalists.
The Russians are using almost no precision weaponry. Their weaponry is imprecise and dropped in large quantity. And again, I don't know what military utility that would have other than to get people displaced and on the road and into someone else's problem set.
The last remaining suspect in Northern Ireland's worst single bomb atrocity has walked free from prison after his trial collapsed. Prosecutors say they've dropped charges against Seamus Daly, who was accused of murdering 29 people in the 1998 attack in Omagh. Michael Gallagher lost his son in the bombing.
This is the last chance that we had for justice, and we've now lost that last chance. Very, very difficult, very painful. If you noticed here this morning, there's not very many families, because I think most families have given up on justice. They've given up on the criminal justice system because they've been let down so many times.
You're listening to the news on RTHK.
Good morning. Welcome to Backchat. I'm Hugh Chewett, your co-host today is Michael Chigani. Michael, good morning to you.
Morning, Hugh.
So, Libor, the bookseller, has appeared in a video interview claiming that he travelled to the mainland to assist in an investigation voluntarily, but illegally, as he didn't want to annoy the families of people he might testify against. He says his life on the mainland is very good, very safe, very free, and he's giving up his UK citizenship because people have used it to kick up problems. It's not a credible story by any standards. Even the police don't believe him. But what can they or anyone else actually do in the circumstances? Do you think the controversy raised over the incident has warned off mainland authorities from trying the same trick again? Or do you think that perhaps the damage is now done and the chickens have been successfully killed to scare the monkey? Email us with your thoughts, questions and comments. Our address, backchat@rthk.hk. You can go to our Facebook page, Backchat on RTHK Radio 3, and comment there, or call us 233-88266. 233-88266 is our number. After 9:20, we're talking about electronic cigarettes. Joining us for our first discussion, we have with us now Richard Choi, Vice Chairman of the Hong Kong Alliance and supported patriotic democratic movements in China. Lawrence Ma, who's a barrister, Chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation. And we hope to be joined soon by James To, who's a legislator with the Democratic Party. David Zweig also joining us later in the programme after the news at 9. Richard Choi, we'll start with you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. The police, as I say, have expressed scepticism, or at least said that they're not getting the whole story. I think that's apparent to everyone, to be honest. What can they do about it? What can anyone do about it?
Well, I think in Hong Kong, the only thing we can do and continue to do is to continue to concern the situation and not to let it die down, and to push the Chinese authority to give the full account. And also, of course, it's important also to push the Hong Kong SAR government to continue to ask these questions to the Chinese authority. I think not just Li Bo, but we also have Gui Minhai and also 3 other people from the Causeway Bay books like Lam Wing Kei, etc. Because the other 3 also being confirmed by the Chinese authority that they are now officially detained. But what is the exact circumstances? What is the exact crimes they are alleged to be committed, and where they're being detained? Still a lack of information. Even the Hong Kong SAR government did not receive the full information. But that is totally, not in line with the notification arrangement by the 2 sides. Because under the notification arrangement, the Chinese authority need to report any Hong Kong resident being detained in mainland about the alleged crime, place of detention, and form of detention, etc. But the information, already those 3 guys already be disappear for more than five months.
Is that written down somewhere? I'm curious. Is it written down somewhere that the mainland authorities are required to supply that information?
Well, under the notification arrangement between the 2 governments, Hong Kong and mainland government,
I think that's a signed agreement, is it, or something?
Yeah,
like
the signed agreement and made public. I think effective from 2001. Okay. That if like Hong Kong resident being detained in mainland or mainland resident detained in Hong Kong, those government have the responsibility to notify the other sides with the various information. So including the where those person being detained. That's important. But now, the situation is still a lot of information missed. For Li Bo, that we don't know is luckily or not, maybe because of Li Bo raised a very great concern from Hong Kong people. So it seems that there's more information and more appearance for Li Bo.
This is what I want to know. I'm totally curious. I'm very mystified now, Richard Choi. Because on the one hand, in the beginning, we all thought it was books that were critical of Xi Jinping, of communist leaders. And then after that, we've got this toothpaste thing, squeezing a little bit out. You had Gui Minhai doing a TV interview. Now you've got Li Bo doing a TV interview. And it's been dragging on for so long. Yet it seems on the one hand, they were arrested for some, allegedly for selling books. But then on the other hand, the mainland authorities seem to be a bit concerned about Hong Kong opinion. So they're releasing some of this stuff. So if I was to ask you, is it really a simple case of book selling, or do you see something more to it? Because this drama is really, really mysterious.
Well, of course, it's difficult we have to make a prediction or whatever to explain, because we don't know the whole story. But certainly this is something we think that some Chinese officers, maybe they're doing something that not in line with the legal arrangement or legal provisions. Like, whatever the Gui Minhai or Li Bo openly said, but definitely they are being, asked or persuaded or taken back to mainland using some illegal means. Like Li Bo, he also admit he was illegal. Right? I think similar as Gui Minhai, he disappeared from Thailand. I think also without.
Well, this is it. That's why I asked the question, because with Gui Minhai, he disappeared from Thailand. Now, in China, you've got the Gong On, which is the police, and then you've got the Gong On, which is national security, right? Yeah. I cannot see that the police could have done something like that in Thailand. It had to be national security.
Probably, quite probably.
In Thailand, right? So if it's national security, does it indicate that if national security goes to Thailand and presumably abducted this person, does it indicate to you that it's something more than what we know?
It's quite likely because if it's just a kind of normal criminal cases, I think the Chinese authority would maybe use a more formal way, like the other three books officers like Lam Wing Kee and two others. They probably being disappear when they were in mainland.
That's right.
So I think, according to the normal circumstances, the public security or even national security officer can just, openly, detain them.
But that's why I asked the question, because they said it was selling books. It seems like it's more than that, right? They said they said that they had sold, they had mailed 4,000 something copies of books to the mainland.
This is also,
that's too simple.
Just an informal source. So I think it's more than that. Is that not just a kind of normal criminal situation, but maybe involve some political elements. Like, we don't know is whether this involve Xi Jinping or whatever.
Factional fighting?
Yeah, probably. So that's some of the mainland officers, we don't know is national security or whatever, they use a kind of, illegal means actually to doing something and try to get some people. We don't know what exactly they want. Seems not just try to detain or convict them. If they just want to detain or convict them, probably I think the investigation would not be so complicated. It already, nearly half a year. So that would involve maybe some other political, situation, and also waiting maybe for some top leaders to make a decision.
That's right. Yes.
But isn't it likely to be a little bit more messy than that? I mean, I suspect he wasn't sort of bound up, a tape put across his mouth and he was thrown in the back of a van or something like that, was he? He was probably
coaxed
coaxed. Yes, probably. It was a good idea it would be a good idea for you to join us or something like that, or if you're interested in the welfare of your family, you might want to do this, or this is a very important matter, you come and help us now, or and I'm sure with Gui Minhai it was something along those lines. So if there is an element of agreement of participation of Li Bo saying not entirely against his will, apparently, how do you judge a case like that?
Well, I think at the first incident, the disappearance of Li Bo, I think that day at the end of December last year, I think the situation at that time is totally against his will. We see the whole situation, including, Li Bo's wife received phone call from Li Bo after he disappeared, and that time, according to his wife reporting to the police at the time, the Li Bo say 普通話, and I think if what's the situation now? Li Bo came on TV that he was voluntary back to mainland and whatever, is quite unlikely he didn't even tell her wife beforehand. So I think the whole situation telling us what Li Bo said recently, it must have some, more, complicated things, not just he said. So quite likely is that some main officer did something illegal. And after being revealed in Hong Kong and aroused a big concern, I think those mainland top officer need to
find a way out,
try to make up the story, and they probably now still even want to.
Well, they've made up several stories already: a traffic accident, illegally selling books,
many things. But also one important thing you can. If we read the TV interview from Li Bo, he can't come back to Hong Kong at this moment. First, because of still assisting the investigation, and second, because many people concern his situation. So you need to let the things cool down.
Well,
so I think that already revealed some things that he can't come back to Hong Kong at this moment. If we come back, then probably people will ask the facts.
So you've got to wait for it to turn out. Right, Lawrence Ma, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Thank you for joining
Michael
us.
And Hugh.
Morning, Lawrence.
I mean, the police have said, that Li Po is not telling the full story, and I think that's obvious. What can they actually do in a situation like this, though, when this person seems more or less to have a gun pointed at their head? They're saying everything's fine. What can you do in a situation like that?
Well, instead of speculating on what we should do, can I come in from a legal perspective? I think that this matter actually raised a very interesting point that we should think about, is that should a person who committed the crime within jurisdiction, should another jurisdiction assist in the extradition? Like, for example, somebody killed someone in the United States and they fled to Hong Kong. Hong Kong has the obligation to send him back, as we can see. That's a proposition. That's an issue that we want to discuss. The second point is Chinese officials and businessmen guilty of corruption fled the country, and it seems that mainland China is developing arrangements now with many other countries, including Australia, to have them sent back to the mainland for trial. So the third point is if foreign countries would assist in extradition, should Hong Kong, which is part of China, also has that obligation? Now, if we go back to the law, the fourth point is we have the basic law, which in Article 95, which says that Hong Kong should maintain juridical relations and render assistance to each other, which means Hong Kong should render assistance to the mainland, and the mainland to Hong Kong too. And if we look at the possible crime that has been committed by Gui Minhai, I'm talking about, one of the allegations was he used publications to blackmail or extortion of political figures so that they would buy his book down. Now, under that sort of blackmail and extortion, if they were committed by a foreigner in America and they fled to Hong Kong, Hong Kong has an obligation to send them back to America under the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance. So that I'm not advocating any proposition, but I'm just bringing it out.
I know, but Mr. Ma, what Michael, you say, if there is extradition treaties, what you say is right, and I think there is one between Hong Kong and China. But in this particular case, the mainland authorities have never clearly stated what these guys did, what crimes they were accused of, and sent that request to the Hong Kong government and said, right, these are the crimes, A, B, C, D, now extradite them. In the case of Assange, for example, and other extradition treaties, the crimes or the alleged crimes are clearly stated. So one country goes to another country and says, all right, this guy did this and did that and did that, and therefore we want to extradite this person. That's how treaties work. But in this case, they didn't ask the Hong Kong police to send these people back. They just came and abducted them or whatever. I don't know. But they didn't go through the proper channels.
And also, I think, like Gui Minhai's case, he disappeared, from Thailand, and we didn't see any kind of extradition, arrangement between Chinese authority and Thailand government. Actually,
is there one between China and Thailand?
I don't really quite know, but I think if it's a proper way of doing that is to ask the government, because under this kind of extradition treaty, also those people being asked to extradite to other country, they also have the right to go to the court at that country, and this is the court to rule whether that extradition is in line with the legal arrangement or not. So it's a kind of legal protection, not just use a kind of informal or even maybe some mainland Chinese officer, no matter went to Thailand or went to Hong Kong, to use their own way, to persuade or to push or attract people to mainland.
Lawrence Ma, do you know whether there was any formal application for...
Can I say something in reply? I mean, as far as I'm aware, there's no extradition treaties between Hong Kong and the mainland China. There's no extradition treaties between the mainland and Australia. So that there cannot be an application that be made. But that's why I'm saying that under the basic law, we have a duty to maintain juridical relations and render judicial assistance to each other. So, and I'm saying that because of many guys have fled the mainland because of corruption and other financial crimes that they've committed in the mainland, other countries are assisting the mainland to bring these people back to the mainland for trial. So that gives a little flavor to our discussion to say, hey, should we have that sort of arrangement and have it properly done, so that if mainland China wants to extradite Li Bo, they can have to go through the legal system here.
So you're advocating a treaty between mainland China and Hong Kong for extraditing people, is that right?
Stop short of advocating, but I'm just saying, wouldn't that better protect our rights? Because we are all suspicious of a covert operation in taking him back, which it cannot be diffused. So we can all speculate about the situation, but what can be done? What are the ways out?
Can what has happened? Everybody says and everybody agrees that one country, two systems has been severely damaged. Is there any way this can be repaired? Zhang Yuxing said to me some time back that the only way that it can be repaired is if there is such a credible story that we believe it, that Hong Kong believes it, then it can be repaired. But so far, every TV interview and so on, as you pointed out, is not credible. So how can we repair this damage?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, to us, we are not satisfied that he's gone back voluntarily. That's the Hong Kong people's concern. But of course, I mean, when it comes down to cross-border enforcement, which is really mainland police officers and national security officers coming here covertly and catching people back up there, that would be too serious. And if Li Bo is charged with a crime, then it's even more serious in damaging the one country, two systems arrangement. That's what I'm saying. I mean, in order to muddle in this and speculate this, I mean, this is probably not the first, not the last case in the spectrum of Hong Kong history. So what's the way out for Hong Kong? If there is a legal treaty properly in place, mainland China would have to respect it, and the person will be protected within our legal system. That's what I'm just saying.
Well, let's put that to James To, who joins us now, legislator with the Democratic Party. Mr. To, do you think this is an argument for having a proper extradition arrangement?
Well, I think I will not disagree with extradition arrangement, but I think the content is very important. The fundamental principle or value of Hong Kong's legal system must be upheld and put into the agreement. I think that is the whole focus.
Well, I remember I was in Vancouver covering to a certain extent the trial of that allegedly corrupt person, Lai Chang-sing, who fled to Canada. And that went on for many years because the Canadian government said, we'll send him back, but he cannot be executed because Canada does not have capital punishment. That's why they fought the case for a long time. And eventually he was sent back on the promise that he would not face the death penalty. So you're saying that if we have an extradition agreement with mainland China, but our laws and mainland China's laws are so different, how can you find common ground for a treaty? We cannot even have a treaty with Macau.
Oh, well, I think that depends on how determined the mainland government to uphold the basic law. Because the basic law is their product, okay? It's their willingness to show the world that they want Hong Kong to be having a system fundamentally different with the mainland China. So that's why if they want, they insist that Hong Kong must uphold basic law as a whole, like what our president said, then I think our fundamental value, which is quite different from the mainland system, must be implemented and entrenched in the agreement.
Okay, a comment. This is from Jalal. Thank you very much. In an email, backchat@rthk.hk. Jalal says, Lawrence Ma does not know what he's talking about. We do not extradite people for actions which are not offences in Hong Kong. Publishing books is protected by human rights. We do not imprison or deport lawful residents for exercising their fundamental rights. No one can seriously suggest that what the mainland authorities have done here is anything less than an unlawful, unprincipled and immoral attack on the fundamental rights of Hong Kong people, says Jalal. Lawrence Ma, what about that point?
Can I reply?
Yep.
Yes, we're under the current Fugitive Offenders Ordinance, we cannot extradite people who have committed a political offence. That's correct. But if the offence is one of extortion or blackmail by asking political leaders to buy their books back, then that would be a crime extraditable under the ordinance at the current moment, regardless of the mainland China or whether the crime is committed in America.
Do you think that actually happened? Because there's been so many rumors flying around as to what really happened.
I don't know. That's why we need a system in Hong Kong so that if he is extradited, the mainland authority has to show what sort of crime that the person has committed. If it is a pure political offence, then he cannot be extradited. If it is about extortion and blackmail, then he can be extradited.
Well, surely we'd only extradite someone if we were convinced that they would have a fair trial. And I'm afraid all the evidence is that they would not have a fair trial in this case.
I can't say that.
I think that is the why. Actually, after 1997, the government between Hong Kong and the mainland government already discussed this kind of arrangement, extradition agreement for, I think, nearly 20 years, but still haven't reached any conclusion. I think one of the important things, I think, as James To mentioned, it is how the arrangement, if there's any, to preserve the value and the system of Hong Kong. I think that's maybe one of the reasons the Chinese authority didn't agree with the arrangement, so now still haven't got this. And also, I think judging from the record of the Chinese authority, even they have law, but in many cases they even not respect. Like in other case, some other people being detained, they are being taken to the CCTV to confess. I think that's all. Actually, even under the Chinese law, this is not a proper arrangement or treatment to the detained persons.
And I noticed the mainland lawyers have been objecting to that, the rash of confessions that have been happening, confessions that happened before the trial, as well.
But James To, you must have seen that interview on Phoenix TV and so on with Li Bo, right?
Yeah.
I watched that too quite a few times. It seems like he was quite relaxed. How do you explain that? He was smiling. His body language was very relaxed.
Well, but when you read in detail the interview, especially about why he want to not to use his home return permit and to go back to mainland China. Well, the reason he said is to protect his safety. I mean, I really couldn't believe that is a relaxed. That's a relaxed and a considered argument. Because if you don't have even any record of entry into mainland China, I think how can the mainland police and the mainland authorities protect you? that is, I think, very in a sense, absurd argument. To an extent that I doubt whether he is under his free will to say something like this.
Okay, well, we're going to have to break for the news at 9 o'clock. We're going to continue in 3 minutes' time. We'd like to hear from you. Drop us a line, backchat@rthk.hk. Some interesting emails to come your way after the news. Before it, the weather mainly fine today, apart from some haze. Cool this morning, dry during the day. Temperatures up to about 20 degrees. Foggy and humid over the weekend. And early next week, I'm afraid, yes, the spring weather, it seems, is arriving. The readings at the moment, 15 degrees Celsius, and the relative humidity is now at 73%. Back in 3 minutes' time.
Target proteins responsible for greying.
We think that eventually you could have a pill or you could have a lotion or for your scalp or something that you might use for this purpose. That's all speculative in the future. We have to do much more study before we can do that.
You're listening to the news on RTHK.
Welcome back. This is Backchat on a Wednesday morning. We're talking about developments in the Lee Bo case. We have with us Richard Choi, who's Vice Chairman of the Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic democratic movements in China. Lawrence Ma is a barrister, Chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation. We're also joined now by Professor David Zweig, who's Director of the Centre on China's Transnational Relations at the University of Science and Technology. Later we're going to be talking about e-cigarettes with an interesting study from the Baptist University. You might have seen coverage of that and more coming your way with Judith Mackay later in the programme in about 15 or so minutes' time. Okay, some comment from listeners. Thank you very much indeed. First of all, a couple from Bowen. Bowen says, Dear Backchat, quite ironically, news of Lee Bo's statement made to the Hong Kong police came on the same day when an American student confessed in North Korea to having committed the crime of stealing an item bearing a propaganda slogan with the encouragement of a bribe being offered by his church. One can't help noticing the similarities of the underlying tone of both confessions. One is free in Hong Kong to react to news of Lee's statement in accordance with one's common sense. Therefore, it came as quite a shock to hear Anthony Wu Ting-yuk, the former hospital authority chief, say on TV last night in an interview he had with Michael Tin, the Lee Bo incident has now been satisfactorily resolved. Surely to any objective observer, Mr. Wu's comment, brief as it was, must represent the moment of truth at which the intelligence of a people has to be faced. He's, after all, a very successful person in the premier city of China, says Bowen. And another comment from Bowen on the question, what can be done? Don't conclude that nothing can be done, Hugh. Many things can be done. First, refuse to give statements like the one given by Gui and Lee any credence. Point out the absurdity of the situation. Keep referring to the incidents. Second, just scream as loud as we collectively can the next time it begins to appear something similar has happened to a Hong Konger in Hong Kong or abroad. Any foreign countries of which the person abducted is a national must, as a minimum, also continue to press to get to the bottom of the case. In any case, Lawrence Ma is talking about Hong Kong, assisting the extradition from Hong Kong to China of somebody who has committed a crime in mainland China. Lee Bo has not committed any such. He has only published books, which act is no crime in Hong Kong, so don't muddy the water, please, says Bowen. Tom says, 3 points. First, it should be clear to us now that Lee will not be coming back to Hong Kong until he serves at least a few years of detention in China with whatever dubious excuses. Lee's letters and his CCTV scripted interview are no different from the North Korean TV footage of the poor American college student crying and confessing his crimes. Third, funny to see what these communist regimes really think of truth, reality and the world. Once again, my sincere apology to your listeners for hearing the super obsequious Facebook comment from Henry. Thanks, Tom. We'll get to Henry's comment in a moment. G says, Ma seems to be ignorant of the discussions on rendition arrangements which have taken place between Hong Kong and the mainland. These discussions apparently ground to a halt. Do ask Elsie Leung and her successors why. So thank you very much indeed for those comments. And on Facebook, Henry says, as expected, the case concerns the sale of political books critical of China in mainland, which according to Chinese laws is most probably in breach of national security. The recent extraordinary length of articles issued by mainland media concerning the case indicates the case is now near the final stage when mainland judge would dictate the judgment. One can reasonably reason out that some of the recipients of the books could be in trouble and in investigated. That's the analysis from Henry. You can comment too on our Facebook page. That's Backchat on RTHK Radio 3. Or just drop us an email, backchat@rthk.hk. James there on our Facebook page also says, so is Chugani implying that the disappeared booksellers have done something worse than selling books? If so, it's a typical mendacious smear, says James. Okay, thank you very much indeed for those comments. David Zweig, good morning to you, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
What do you make of that, the latest statement? Do you think we learn anything from that statement, that Libor, that video?
Well, I think that everybody has to wonder, to what extent it's him, his real view, though the Hong Kong police have said that they will not pursue this any further with him while he's in China, which I think suggests, that maybe they think. I mean, even the police chief. I mean, I thought I haven't listened to the first half of the show, so I apologize. But I think it's amazing. The front page of the South China Morning Post today saying that the police chief doesn't believe it. That's a pretty amazing statement.
Well, I think to be quite honest, nobody does.
I know that, but it's one thing not to believe it. It's another thing to say in public for the Hong Kong police chief, after having interacted with the security forces on the other side, to say that he doesn't believe it. I think that's pretty strong. I mean,
well, do you think they even know what's going on in Hong Kong?
Well, because
the chief executive says even though Libor says don't pursue it, they are still going to pursue it. The police commissioner says he doesn't believe the full story, and that when they went up there to talk to Libor, he wasn't really very forthcoming. So do you think our leaders in Hong Kong actually are even clued in or being told what's going on?
No, I think they're not. That's what the police chief has basically said. They don't know. I mean, we can sort of get a picture. I think we can start to form, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, I think we can form some kind of picture about what happened, or some of what's happened. I mean, it's clear that these guys were I believe these guys were smuggling books into China. So when someone says that you, Michael, were smearing them, I mean, they were doing something that is illegal. I mean, when I go into China, and I, in the past, would bring friends of mine, one of these books, I know that the book can be confiscated. I know that. It's not.
Well, it's happened to me once, but I tried to bring a book across the border, and for whatever reason, I'm never stopped. But that one time I was. I think maybe it was my body language, and then he found this book.
But you know that what you're doing is not appropriate, right? And what they were doing was clearly illegal. Now, maybe it was Gui who was doing this, and he wasn't, so if you want to arrest these guys, we in Hong Kong would say arrest them when they're on the mainland, right? Because they haven't committed a crime in Hong Kong. That's fair, right? But maybe Gui never goes into the mainland. Maybe he's smart enough to send his people in with these books, right, in different covers and mail it in and do all this kind of stuff. So the mainland can't get him, which probably really annoyed them. Because what he's doing is, by mainland laws, illegal, right? The books being in the mainland. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were saying, all of this is a little shady, right? There's a lot of shade, gray.
So why do you think? Why does that explanation satisfy you?
Well, it doesn't satisfy me. What it does say, it doesn't satisfy me because the mainland had no right to go to Thailand.
No. But I mean, why do you give credence to that rather than prostitutes or car accidents
because that's what they do to make a living. That's their living. That's what they do. They're booksellers.
Yeah. What about the explanation that they
were bribing mainland?
No, that they'd published the wrong things. That they'd published, they'd been rude about Xi Jinping.
Well, but that's what they do. They do that.
Yeah.
But
you're saying that their crime was the smuggling rather than the content.
No, the crime is smuggling the content into China, right? So it's the content that's not allowed. And how did they get it into China? They smuggled it, but they can do it protected in Hong Kong.
Why do you think that they were smuggling?
Because how else do you get them into China?
Well, why do you think they were getting into China? What's the
what do you mean? Why do I think they were actually getting the books into China?
Yeah.
Well, actually, just a gut feeling that says, I mean, look at Gui, right? So I think this is interesting also. So we can look at Gui and we can say, look, do we believe Li Bo's confession? Well, Gui's already given us 2 confessions, right? I think that's important. He's already confessed to 2 things. The first one, which seemed much sillier, we now know is probably wrong. So we know that he lied under pressure once. So again, if you want to say, is anybody telling the truth? We don't know, but we clearly know that Gui lied once because he got into trouble, I think, for the books. We know. Why would I think that? I think that because this is a time when Xi Jinping is trying desperately to crack down on corruption, and the last thing you would want is a book that talks about his sexual antics in Fujian. 30 years ago.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the smuggling side of it, which would be a crime in Hong Kong, would not be a political crime. I mean, it was thought that these books were being sold in Hong Kong, and that mainlanders would come across here, they'd buy the books, and some would get taken back to China. But now you're saying that you think he was smuggling them. Well, what's the evidence for that?
Okay, well that's fair, but that's the evidence for it is that he said that. That in his video that he explained in detail how he would change the covers of books to try and get them in. Now, okay, so you may not believe that. That's fine. You don't believe it. I can't prove it, but it's a story that, to me, in terms of why you would come out to get them.
But why does it take that long? If you buy the story of them having smuggled 4,000 books across, Richard Choi is talking about another angle where these guys were bribing mainland officials
to get them in.
No. To say you give me money or I'll expose you in these books.
Lawrence Mars.
Lawrence Mars. Yeah. So somebody is. There are these other plotting. Nobody knows what happened. But if it is just a simple case of smuggling 4,000 books into China, why has it taken so long?
Well, it's taken so long because they don't want to admit that they did something maybe illegal, the police, that they went across and kidnapped people and brought them across the border. They're trying to figure out a way to avoid being accused of muddying one country, 2 systems, which they clearly, that's still the bottom line. The whole story, the bottom line to all this is the mainland officials did something they shouldn't have done, which is that even if they don't like what's being done, if the guys are still overseas, you can't get them. They're here. What they did in Hong Kong is not. Is it illegal from Hong Kong laws to send books into China? Why is it illegal?
It's not illegal to send books.
From the Chinese perspective, it's smuggling.
And not from the Hong Kong perspective.
But not under Hong Kong, right. So my point is, these guys still didn't do anything. My guess is that these guys didn't do anything illegal under Hong Kong law. And what they did it in Hong Kong, largely, right? Somebody was bringing the books across. I would believe that someone was getting those books across somehow, whether they're mailing them, putting them in crates, and sending them in. That's still legal from Hong Kong perspective. But once it gets to the other side, it's illegal, right? So they have to arrest these guys who are doing something legal in Hong Kong for doing something that would be illegal only in the mainland. And that's a real problem, and you can't explain doing that under one country, 2 systems. So they're probably sitting there trying to figure out how do we explain what we did and why we did it, and who's going to take the hit for this, and and all this to explain the fact that they're really mucking around with one country, 2 systems. I'm comfortable with that. Now I could be wrong, right? But that seems to me, and again, did the center send these guys in? Clearly the center has said crack down. I can believe quite comfortably that the central government really sent out some kind of message saying crack down on these kinds of books coming into China, particularly books that attack Wang Qishan and Xi Jinping, who are going around nailing everybody else for this kind of behavior. The last thing they want to be able to do is have people say, well, why can you arrest me for this when the leadership's done this 20 years ago? Why aren't they? So I feel comfortable again my gut. I've been doing this stuff for a fair amount of time, and I've been right usually, but still sometimes wrong. My gut tells me that. Am I wrong? Could be. I can make a few more points, and then I got to go. Right?
Yeah.
One of I think the TV confessions is really silly, particularly for Hong Kongers, because it looks like show trials. It makes Hong Kong people very nervous to see what mainland security forces.
Can I put that point to Lawrence Ma, because we haven't heard him in this section? It does look like it looks like a show trial. It looks like the North Korean, as a couple of people have pointed out. You watch that confession, that North Korean confession. It's exactly the same, and we've seen this trend for televised confessions even before a trial. Happening in China. Hong Kong people are very worried by that kind of thing, aren't they?
I think, Hugh, I've replied to that comment before in my last interview. What I'm saying, Lee Bo, we can't replicate him because we don't have the information that he has. We don't have the channel of publication. We don't have the...
No, it's not really... I'm not trying to trick you up. I'm just trying to say, do you understand that people... this really worries Hong Kong people. People are not impressed by this.
Them nervous.
People are not fooled by this. And
this is Stalinism.
Yeah.
Right? This is the worst side. We want to look on the positive side of the government in China, that it's done all these good things. We want to be able to say that. We want to biaoyang, say, they do really good things. But when they do something like this, it's like there's something in their DNA that says that this is okay, and maybe it's okay within China, right? Because I've talked to people in China, and they say, well, we don't know, and these guys said they did it, and they don't have the level of cynicism that Hong Kong people do. And when you do this kind of thing, you reinforce...
Yeah. Lawrence Ma?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We need a system of extradition treaties between Hong Kong and China, so that if they want to have somebody back, they have to go through the legal system here, which protects our rights.
We can't trust them.
But they couldn't get those guys. Those guys didn't do anything wrong. The guys didn't do anything wrong in China, so there's nothing to extradite them for. They didn't commit a crime.
Well,
extradition means you kill someone in China, you run to Hong Kong.
I know, David.
You get caught.
There's allegation of extortion and blackmail. I mean, if they can't get the evidence on this, then Lee shouldn't be extradited. But if they can have evidence of blackmail and extortion, it comes within our system, then we extradite them.
Fair, but I wouldn't trust them.
But does it necessarily have to be that it's also a crime on the other side? Going back again to when I was in Vancouver covering the Lai Chang-sing case, he was accused of corruption in China. He fled to Vancouver, applied for political asylum, and the case went on for years. Eventually, what he allegedly did in China was not a crime in Canada.
But why was he jailed in Canada?
He was applying for political asylum.
But why was he jailed? Wasn't he jailed in Canada, Michael?
No, he was detained. He was not jailed. He was detained because, he was not accused of any crime and went through a trial or anything like that. He was detained because he was applying for political asylum and the case was going on. So he wasn't let out. He was under house arrest. But then eventually they did send him back on the condition that there was no death penalty applied to him. But on what grounds did Canada send him back? Because what he did allegedly in China, corruption, was not a crime in Canada.
One of the reasons is that Lai Chang-sing did not have the right to continue to stay in Canada.
His political asylum application
failed. Yeah, so that's why actually if in normal circumstances, the Canada government would maybe ask him to leave, and so that's if he Lai Chang-sing has a right to remain to stay or even become a Canadian resident, that's totally another thing. That extradition treaty must apply to him. That if the Canadian government need to extradite Lai Chang-sing back to China, that the offense alleged should be the mutual offense between two countries.
Okay, well,
we're crime in Canada.
All right, we're out of time now, but thank you very much indeed for joining us. Lawrence Ma, barrister, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Exchange Foundation. Professor David Zweig, director of the Centre on China's Transnational Relations at the University of Science and Technology, and Richard Choi, who's vice chairman of the Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic democratic movements in China, also speaking earlier to legislator James To, bringing the time now to 22 minutes past 9. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today, gentlemen. And to electronic cigarettes now, an interesting study by scientists at Baptist University have found that electronic cigarettes were found to contain 1 million times more cancer-causing substances in certain substances than outdoor air. The Hong Kong Council on Smoking and Health, which commissioned the study, called for a ban on e-cigarettes as soon as possible before they become more popular. Judith Mackay has joined us, director of the Asian Consultancy on Tobacco Control. Judith, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi, thanks so much indeed for joining us. We spoke to you before on the issue of e-cigarettes, and you said you were kind of in two minds because you thought they had a role to play in, helping people quit maybe, and they were, by some measures less harmful than cigarettes. What does this new research do to your decision? Are you still in two minds, or you made up your mind now?
Well, I think the data that has come in over the last 12 months indicates they're more problematic than we thought they were initially. And, for example, quite apart from the Baptist study, which I can come on to in a minute, they've just done a review of more than about 5,000 papers looking at do they help people quit. And they found that the science was poor. There were very anecdotal papers. Only 5 out of that, in fact, 569 were eligible for proper scientific scrutiny. And of those, the ability to help people quit, it was not statistically significant. So I think with that huge accumulation of science in the last year, we are now much less certain that they would actually help smokers quit smoking.
So I don't know much about e-cigarettes. I know that smoking cigarettes is addictive, and then people who don't really want to do it because they think it's harmful to their health, they switch to e-cigarettes. So when you switch to e-cigarettes, you say it doesn't really help them quit smoking. But if you switch to e-cigarettes, do you become addicted to e-cigarettes?
We don't know that. You say you don't know much about e-cigarettes. I think the problem is the world doesn't know much about them because they're totally unregulated. And one of the things that the Baptist study has actually highlighted is a complete, utter variation in what's in them. They only tested 12 samples and they were all over the place. I mean, for example, one of the cancer-producing chemicals was, the average value was about 20, but some of them had 500 in them. They were all over the place. And what was even more worrying about the Baptist study is that those that did have any ingredient disclosure on the cover, many of them were completely wrong. They said they had no nicotine, or they didn't mention nicotine, whereas in fact they did have nicotine in them. So quite apart from the numbers and the realization that they are cancer-producing substances in e-cigarettes, just as in e-cigarettes, the problem is that at least normal cigarettes, smoking cigarettes, are actually regulated, and they have to give the tar content and the nicotine and all of those values, and government chemists test them. These e-cigarettes are all over the place, so I think the reality is you don't know what you're actually smoking.
But nicotine is a controlled substance, isn't it? Or, I remember having to sign a book to get nicotine chewing gum.
Well, that's right. That's true. And you normally can get nicotine legally through cigarettes or through the nicotine replacement therapy, the patches or the gums and things like that.
But you have to sign for those, don't you? Or so you used to.
Not in Hong Kong, is my understanding. And again,
I used to have to do it in Watson's. Right. You couldn't buy the nicotine patches without signing for them.
Well, luckily I've never had to buy nicotine patches.
Why would you have to sign for patches and not sign for cigarettes?
Well, I think, the reality is that if cigarettes were introduced in the market today, they would never be allowed. They're a historical reality that we're trying to sort of ease out. But the reality is that they're with us. They've been unregulated and on the markets freely, but certainly they wouldn't be allowed to do so today.
So what next? I mean, as you say, nobody really knows a lot about e-cigarettes, yet people are moving from cigarettes to e-cigarettes. Do you foresee another great major health hazard when more people move to e-cigarettes? Because it's uncontrolled.
Well, I don't think the health hazard of tobacco will be removed, let me put it that way. I think it'll be about 3 years before we have enough data in to really be able to compare them with cigarettes. I mean, the Baptist study compared some of the levels with the environment, but more realistically, we need to compare them with what's in cigarettes. And again, that shows that some of the chemicals are much lower than in cigarettes. Some are hugely higher. Some are massively higher, like formaldehyde. Some are much lower, like the nicotine. So I think, the difficulty is that we're just on the cutting edge of learning about e-cigarettes. And the problem is that governments have to regulate at this point. Do they allow them? And if you look at the world, it's an absolute patchwork quilt of those that are freely allowed, those that are banned, those that are only on prescription. Some ban advertising, some ban sales to minors. The whole world is all over the place.
Where are e-cigarettes actually banned?
There's a list of about 20 countries now that have got bans on e-cigarettes. Some, like the European countries, are allowing them for very regulated sales. Some are all over the place, like in the US. And in fact, as we speak, the Federal and Drug Administration, the FDA, in the US is struggling with what to do about e-cigarettes. So, Hong Kong is not alone in this difficulty. And as I've said before, if you talk to scientists at the universities who are researching e-cigarettes, it's still going to be a few years. And quite apart from the chemicals, what we don't know is the social science. Do they encourage young people to start? Not much evidence of that at the moment. Do they, at the end of the day, help people quit? Do they renormalize smoking so people get used again to seeing people sort of puffing out steam from or fumes from their mouths? I mean, there's massive social questions, social use questions.
You're not supposed to smoke cigarettes indoors, like in bars, restaurants, in shopping malls. Can you smoke e-cigarettes in bars, restaurants, shopping malls now in Hong Kong?
Well, the situation we have at the moment is that if an e-cigarette does not contain nicotine, it is allowed to be smoked. If it contains nicotine, it is banned full stop. But what the problem is in Hong Kong is that they're selling the equipment, they're selling the sachet things that don't contain nicotine, but the nicotine-containing ones are just coming over the border. And this is yet another difficulty. If you're a tobacco control officer, an inspector, you have no idea whether the person who's vaping is actually vaping a product that contains nicotine or not. So the difficulties are as great as they were a year ago when you last interviewed me on this program. But I think some of the harmfulness is getting solidified.
But they have to make a call, don't they? So
they have to make a call.
So would you say ban it or not?
Well, I think the government is following a highly precautionary principle, and I think probably at the end of the day that's the right one. I hope to be able to say in another year's time that was definitely the right one. So I think it's the right one. So what else can it do? Can it allow them on the market? Can it allow them unrestricted with the risk that, it might actually renormalize smoking? It might even prevent smokers from quitting, because if they think, going to vaping's safe, they may be less inclined to quit. So these questions are still, even a year on from last year, these questions are still unanswered. But I think the Baptist study has shown us the chaotic nature of what's in them, and the fact that the ingredient disclosure is false. I mean, they say there's no nicotine in them when there are. So I think it's moving the science along and our concern along about them.
Okay, well, Judith Mackay, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Director of the Asian Consultancy on Tobacco Control. Thank you very much indeed. Some comments left over from our first discussion I'd just like to share in emails. Jalal says book selling is not illegal anywhere. It's protected by human rights, which are international. The mainland government is in breach of human rights law. Let's stop pretending that the security forces are following the law, because if they are, it is a lesser law. And Alan says... Backchat, having worked in the book trade, the idea that smuggling 4,000 books into China would justify such a criminal enterprise, bribing officials, etc., is absurd. You would be lucky to earn $50 a copy. Publishing books legally is marginal enough. If you have to meet all these other costs, you're operating at a loss. And Bowen says, addressing David Zweig's point, the confessions given by Gui and Lee so far will certainly fall foul of the conditions for a confession to be accepted and possibly believed under our legal system, which, by the way, very much embodies common sense. Confessions are not admissible if they are extracted out of the hope of a favour or fear that something unpleasant might happen to him or her. That's not the way things are done in China, of course, but we should not talk as if we have accepted that the confessions have been conducted in the proper way if it had been done in Hong Kong. Bowen, thank you very much indeed for those comments. Michael, many thanks to you.
Thank you, Hugh.
Here we go with the weather. Mainly fine, apart from some haze. Cool this morning, dry during the day. Temperatures up to about 20 degrees. Moderate easterly winds. The outlook remaining cool in the morning, mainly fine during the day. In the next couple of days, foggy and humid over the weekend, though, and early next week. 15 degrees now. Humidity is 72%.